in South Africa. Can you hear me well?
Can hear you
Hi,
loud. Yeah.
Jessyca.
Are you in Cape Town?
We
We
certainly
are
are.
in
the
Cape
wine
Town.
We're in Cape Town. Okay, I'm in Eugene, Oregon, and you said it's almost summer in Cape Town, or you've got summer weather in Cape Town?
Still a
It's
little bit on the
almost
chilly
summer,
side.
but still a little bit cool at the moment. But summer is on its way, and we're excited about it.
Okay, and then we're going into winter, but alas, I'm going to South America, so I've got to change my path really quickly into. I have an American bathing suit that doesn't work in South America at all, so we're going to have to, it's part of our culture shock situation there. Okay,
Wait,
so
please
we'll talk a little bit
Please
about
explain.
what's that?
Please explain. I need an American
Well,
bikini
in
doesn't work in-
Brazil, they wear. So in the United States, we tend to have bigger bathing suits. I guess depends on where you live. So maybe in Miami, it's a little different, but over where I am, we have bigger bathing suits. And then when you get to Brazil, thong bathing suits are very popular. And if you don't have a thong bathing suit, you look like a really strange person. And unfortunately, the women in South America are phenomenally smaller than the women in the United States. So when I clothes shopping for me, so I wear medium in the United States, but in Brazil that's extra large. So so when I get to Brazil, it's we're buying clothing isn't really optional because the women are just so petite and small and 5 foot tall and 100 pounds, and then I come in and I'm towering over all of the women in South America. So that's kind of the culture situation there.
Please report back with pictures on return from your. It sounds like an amazing holiday.
Yes, it is. So I'll post that. I'll send you that when I'm there. Okay, so we'll talk about the broadcast and then we'll talk a little bit about your backgrounds, and then we plan on broadcasting live as well.
Fantastic.
All right,
we are very excited.
Yes, we're very excited. Okay, so Time to Wine is a live broadcast featuring experts in wine, social media marketing, leadership, and marketing, and each speaker is featured on LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm working on an Instagram broadcast also, and this is every other Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The live stream broadcast is featured on YouTube and other digital platforms every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we now have been going live internationally, which is pretty fun, between international countries. So I just went live with Australia, and she's 16 hours ahead, and I had to go. We had to broadcast live at 4 p.m. because we couldn't find a mutual time that worked for both of us. All right. And I'm also I was just approved for LinkedIn Live, and I'm working on Amazon Live. So moving forward, Annelize has over 20 years business experience across different departments, ranging from production, marketing, and sales, and human resources. She has a niche in the wine industry, and James Stewart is into digital transformation in the music industry and also in the wine industry. He's a creative tech lead for Achieve, an award-winning rock star, which we need to talk about, legend from South Africa, which we haven't discussed yet. So I'm going to be asking both of you questions, and you can tell me who's going to talk first. And I think Annelize is going to kind of direct that a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about your work history. So do you want to talk about your work history, and then you can go into James's work history?
Fantastic. Thank you, Jessyca. First of all, well done on everything that you are bringing to the wine industry. We all know it's a time where anything positive is very important. So everything that you're doing, we're following and we appreciate it. So it's exciting and an honor for us to be here. So well done to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, a little bit about my history. I've been, like you've said, I've been in business for about 20 years. My study background being strategy execution mostly, in which I did my degree and my master's and some research. I've been in the wine industry for about 11, 12 years. I've been very fortunate and blessed to work with some of the top wine brands in South Africa. Many of them, Distel, KWV, Groot Constantia, Pickeniers Kloof, who's a new client, and quite a few brands in the South African industry. I have a very big interest in leadership specifically, and like I've said, strategy execution. Obviously, the last few years brought a lot of changes in the wine industry, which I think is quite exciting. It brings innovation to the forefront. It brings expertise out of other industries, where I think James is a partner in our business called Achieve, which is about achieving results in the wine industry. James will introduce himself, but yeah, let me start with the rock star, because that's the exciting bit. James is a genuine rock star, South African SAMA award-winning singer, songwriter, and also having been part of the digital transformation of the music industry. We've both been working in the experience economy, and it's quite exciting to see how much of those experiences we could bring over to the wine industry. And we've been having fun ever since. James, over to you.
Thank you, Annelize. You've just about said everything that needs to be said, but I studied law when leaving school. Back in those days, it was either going to serve in the army immediately, and it wasn't a great time in South Africa to be serving in the army at all, or go and study. Fortunately, I managed to get my act together and got accepted into law school at the University of Cape Town, and I studied that. And about halfway through my law articles or apprenticeship, by then, a band that I was in was doing successfully on the local circuit, and I decided to bail out of the law, took a swerve to the left, which surprised my parents somewhat. I'd met a record producer who I became a partner with in a recording studio, which then became the recording studio, which recorded my albums and albums from other bands in Cape Town. That brought in relationships with the record industry as a whole. So they were using us as eyes and ears in Cape Town, which was then a sleepy little town at the tip of Africa. And a record business around the music industry in South Africa started, publishing company, copyright management and acquisition, the legal side of things coming into it somewhat. Writing commercial music for adverts and films during the day, and recording bands at night. And it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. I think just sort of how I found my way after becoming a dad a couple of times over and being married to a wonderful woman for quite some years, and moving out to Franschhoek, which is the winelands, and away from the sort of pulsing metropolis of Cape Town, things just took their natural pathway, and I got more into marketing, and I realized that sort of, I suppose, from an instinctual kind of point of view, the things that I'd learned, copying flyers and putting up band posters and learning how to promote shows and negotiate with this and learn how to do that, it put me in good stead to sort of approach people with regard to solving marketing and communication problems. And I just sort of found my way into Annelize's world. Well, not by accident. Annelize is she's a world champion karateki. She is one of the senior and most valued students and instructors of my father-in-law, who's the chief instructor of her style. And I've known Annelize for quite some time. She's a warrior, a champion, a genuine craft to her artist. It's something that she consistently and absolutely righteously pursues. It's an amazing thing to watch people and their craft. And at some point we had known her socially in the karate world, sort of buzzing around my family as all the karate guys do. I'm the only guy in the family without any form of a belt. So I'm, including my wife, who's a purple or a brown belt. I think I don't ask these days, and I don't. I just cower in the corner most of the time. But we started talking about certain things, and I realized Annelize, she had some problems that I might be able to help solve, and Achieve sort of started from that.
And that sounds so wonderful. Hearing both of Annelize, both worked with wineries, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you want to talk about your work with wineries? Yes. Okay. Who'd like to start?
No, I've got zero. I mean, prior to my to joining Annelize, I have zero wine experience at all.
Okay, all right. So you're transforming the wine industry with your previous experience. Got it.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do you want to talk about your work in the wine industry?
Yes, I'm happy to talk about it. So I've been working in the wine industry, like I said, for about 11 years. My studies have all been founded in the wine industry, which has been quite interesting. So so I've been working, as I was working in the experience economy, doing chocolate and wine pairing, doing wine tastings. I've got a big passion for education, so I did a lot of training in my career, like tasting room training, more on the business side than on the product side. So more about how to engage with customers, service level type of things. And I've been very fortunate to work from tasting room level up to board level. And then, like I said, as part of my studies, I've also been fortunate to work with some of the main companies in South Africa, where I did leadership research, so more on the coaching field, why the strategy implementation in the South African industry, for example, fails. So it was interesting to discover, and it was fascinating for me to learn whilst I'm working in the industry and getting some feedback from floor level and then getting some feedback from board level. So yeah, so I've worked across the spectrum. I've done a lot of tastings, I've done a lot of events, done the wine shows, which were great fun prior to COVID. More about the social than the work. I'm not sure how well we performed at the shows, but it was great fun. And yeah, and then also I've been teaching a little bit, especially here in the US. So I've been working with the Council of International Education Exchange, doing students from the US that visit South Africa, taking them to wine farms, teaching them economics of wine, and a little bit about what makes the South African industry unique. So yeah, so I think in my career, I've been very fortunate to work with some of the top winemakers in the world. Guys like Bula Gerber from Groot Constantia. Yeah, I wouldn't feel fulfilled if I didn't mention his name. But so it's been great. It's been a great experience, and I've enjoyed the industry. And I love the people in it. I think the South African wine industry are a really great group. James and I, are definitely working more with the marketing and the business side than what we are on the product side. But it's been great to just see all the angles come together.
I started in the wine industry. I was taking students to Italy for 4 years. So I was working with Italian wineries, and we were writing social media marketing plans for the Italian wineries. And when I left, this started this whole, I invent things. So I'm an inventor. So I started a broadcast, and it was all men in the beginning. And then I kept inventing. So I think at the beginning, I would just pair pictures together because I was starting to figure out what I was doing, and it's kind of evolved. So I'd have two pictures together and say, we're doing a live broadcast. And then it just kept evolving. So it went from the graphics to the video into the live. And then next thing, we're going to be sitting at a table. We're going to be sitting in a room somewhere in chairs talking, I'm sure, on a television program.
Fantastic. We definitely hope that South Africa is on your list. And James and I enjoy the showing around and the destinations in the South African industry. We always tend to spend a bit longer.
But I haven't been yet. I'd love to go. Okay, so you have also extensive wine education. Let's talk about your wine education and the doors that it opens for you, or anyone that's in studying. I had a lot of students that were interested in studying wine. So if you also maybe talk about some of the jobs or the doors that are open when you start studying wine.
Yeah. So my educational background is more in, like I said, on the business side. So I went into business in general, and then sort of loved the wine industry, found my way around things. But just by seeing also like where I couldn't find any answers, and being passionately curious by nature, and being a complete research nerd, I enjoy looking for answers, and I enjoy learning about new things. I'm a passionate student, like James mentioned, karate. Like martial arts is a very big part of who I am. I've been doing it for like 35, 37 years. So I enjoy searching for stuff. Wow. So it was the same with my education in the wine industry, where I'm also just in the beginning of everything. But basically, I've done a degree, general management, business management, very much focused on commerce and the commercial side of business. Found my way in strategy, which was my major, then did an extra year of strategic management, and then finally did my Masters of Commerce in strategic management, with my thesis being like the strategy to execution gap in the wine industry, looking at leadership's influence. So that's still an area that I'm looking to explore even further. I've had a brilliant professor. Like everything in my education, she's been a real rock. She is Professor Esther Nienaber from the University of South Africa. She for the past few years, she's been based in the US quite a bit, at the University of Northern Arizona. So we've been working together on a few things as well. And we've just had our first article, which was based on some of my research that I co-authored with her and Professor McNeil from NAU as well, into the in an international journal. So we're quite excited about that. The article is about competitive advantage and how the wine industry is ready for change at the moment. So I'm looking forward to learn more. I think there's a lot happening in the industry, and I think there's a lot of groundbreaking stuff happening from an education perspective. And it's great for me to have somebody like James in the business side, where we're testing theory and bringing theory and practice together, which has always been a challenge in any experience economy environment.
And then, speaking of that, we'll talk a little bit. We'll let James address this a little bit. Innovation comes in very strange ways. And as we've talked, COVID across the world has created a very interesting environment for all of us and very strange science fiction films. So do you want to talk a little bit about, James, COVID, or start with James, with COVID in South Africa and some of the digital evolution that's happened with that, or entrepreneurship? And then, of course, the alcohol ban came right after that. So we can talk about that.
Sure. The COVID sort of economic and activity devastation obviously has a human cost, which is massive. But there are remarkable similarities to what happened to the music industry back in the 2000s when a file sharing app called Napster came along and allowed everybody to share all of their music with their entire contact list for free. It completely kneecapped the music industry, which was showing signs of decline for quite some time. And just a few years ago, the CD had been invented, and that had this sudden adrenaline shot in the arm. The music industry suddenly kind of flourished again for a short time. But then this digital thing happened, and along with that, thinking just had to change. But a lot like the Titanic, these big things take a long time to change, and it was the agile people that were able to really kind of get curve or fist things. The kind of things that were happening was in the day hip hop was outside of the mainstream of music, which kind of gave them a freewheeling and a disconnected to the music industry way of thinking, but a completely connected way of thinking with regard to their community and what they're trying to achieve. They were completely comfortable giving away mixtapes for free as long as people noticed them. And then they did endorsement deals with Adidas and Samsung. They didn't mind where the $5 million came from. It didn't have to come from album sales, which no one could sell anymore. It could come from wherever it came from. So these and it also, this confusion lasted for 10 years before Steve Jobs and Apple came along and sort of provided a solution for the whole thing. Hey, we'll do 99 cents a download and reset the playing field. And everything has sort of happened from then. But the devastation of the music industry was absolutely palpable, and the record companies had no response. It took somebody from the outside and a recalibration of everything. So that experience is I believe the useful element that I bring to Achieve with regard to the wine industry. I openly say I can't make any mistakes with regard to putting my foot in it, because I don't know anything about wine and how it's made specifically or how to taste it, because I'm the outsider. So and a lot of the ideas that I shoot around and the proposals that I make are considered with wide-eyed ridiculousness, but the reality is they often come from this place where, when radical things happen, a radical shift in thinking is required. You don't get different results from the same way of doing things. So it was quite interesting to see, interesting and devastating to see quite a number of wine producers, big wine estates that were solely dependent or almost exclusively dependent on their tasting room, And that's where you should be focusing. That's where your principal engagement is. That's where your relationships are forged. But this digital thing is always something that we're going to get around to, and we'll get that sorted eventually. And there was no plan B. And then, of course, there's this frantic catch-up, and then you can hurt your brand by overexposing and doing things on digital that are perhaps a little naive, etc., etc. So it's been a very, very interesting time for the wine industry. There are people that have been a little bit more organized than others. The ones that are organized are not necessarily the ones that are succeeding. It's definitely the ones just like you that are trying things, getting into editing, mastering this, trying a few more things, rolling them out, taking 90 days to have a look at them, making sure that data is measurable so you can actually take a look in the rearview mirror and specifically see where you're going wrong. And then, to be honest, what I fundamentally know as a guy in the music industry coming into this new wild digital world that we live in, is that engagement and communication, there are different ways of achieving it. In other words, a digital channel versus we're having a live conversation over a digital channel, and there's a difference between a live performance or a live tasting and an online version of the same. But essentially, you've got to get some fundamentals right, and that is you have to connect with this person on the other side of the screen. You have to figure out how you're going to do that. So Annelize being the strategist and me being the freewheeling creative guy with a bit of street experience, we're able to, sort of figure out what the problem is that we're trying to solve far out there, and then sort of work our way backwards and break it down into little pieces so we can solve those problems one by one.
Yeah, I think that, James, just to add to what you're saying, Jessyca, you were talking about education, like it's from my side also having one foot in the digital and in our strategy side and the other foot in education. It was quite a challenge when the whole COVID thing happened. Like a lot of people haven't had the digital background, or they haven't had the education, and I'm talking all levels in wine industry, where there's been a lot of training in specific fields, but it was like definitely something, and it's something James and I are very passionate in our business as well. We try and share whatever we find and whatever is useful, because the industry, whatever we can bring that helps people to develop will eventually develop the industry. And South Africa, as you know, the wine tourism industry is quite an important part, especially of the area, the Western Cape that we live in. So it's something that we're passionate about contributing towards its growth.
And my background, I have a very strong digital background. So my background's in sales and marketing, and then I taught all of the social media marketing classes and digital classes at the University of Oregon, and I started the first collegiate social media club. So I've been working with digital for quite a while, and so I would say my expertise is digital strategy or marketing strategy too. Okay, so let's talk about the alcohol ban. There's been all kinds of interesting innovation. From my knowledge, South Africa is the only person that had an alcohol ban during COVID. Is that correct?
Well, firstly, I'd like to just sort of state on record that I didn't like it.
we had a people ban where we couldn't see, we weren't supposed to visit our family. I didn't like that, or I'm very outgoing, so the people ban was kind of a bummer to me.
Yeah, I think it's debatable, like the alcohol or the family ban, but definitely it was a challenging time, Jessyca, no doubt. You can imagine the impact was quite severe. There were, obviously, I'm not sure how aware you are what happened with the alcohol ban, but there were different stages. At some stages, there were no sales allowed, and which was obviously devastating to a lot of wineries, and also the unpredictability of what will happen when, made from where we're involved with business, from a strategy point of view, it was quite difficult. What James mentioned earlier, it was critically important to be able to adapt and be agile, which hasn't been the way that the wine industry has been functioning. So, so it's been a challenge, and we don't know what the future will hold. Like James was saying, it's obviously like the impact on human lives was severe all over in all industries. But we're trying to take the positives out of everything. And from the digital side, Jessyca, you've been in the digital side, it is an agile environment, and it is something that changes almost week to week, day to day, So, we've done some exciting work in this time of the ban, which we're very excited about, and we're rolling out internationally at the moment. So, all things, like there's always a silver lining, and we're looking for that.
And
Yes,
I think here are the silver lining. Some of the things that I saw with the silver lining, and you can talk about your silver lining, is we had a huge shift back to family here. So I think we were in a very consumerism sort of society. And what I saw, there was, especially when everything, all the businesses shut down and we were supposed to all be at home. So there were a lot of people posting on social media, and they were posting things that were really interesting to see, which were people who were at home doing puzzles with their family. People were working at home, and there were kids banging pots and pans in the background. There were cats walking across the desk while you were trying to have a meeting. And there were lots of families. So, for example, I know a family that have college kids and younger kids, and the college kids were all at home, and the younger kids were at home, and they were doing things like cleaning out the garage, and they were reorganizing and painting the houses and things like that. So there was a lot of really intense family time happening, which hasn't, we've kind of strayed away in the United States from that a little bit. Did you see that in South Africa? Our culture is a little different that way, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can specifically speak to that point. We definitely saw in many instances the best coming out in people.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, for instance, here in Franschhoek, it's sort of the cuisine capital of South Africa. Got quite a few restaurants which have won many international awards over the years. So it's a destination made up, a little microeconomy made up from the hospitality industry, with superb chefs who thought nothing of waking up the following day and converting their kitchens into soup kitchens, and not just for one day, not for 2 days, for 90 days, and then showing people how to do it and going to help, real heroes,
Mm-hmm.
and a noticeable absence of complaining. Typically, I like to think that South Africans have a reputation of kind of self-helpers. The old American pioneering spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and for the most part, that not for the most part, of course, and people struggling at home, noticing the sort of psychological fallout from COVID sort of seeping through. A very, very interesting time. But yeah, and musicians reaching out, also figuring out how to do things. Winemakers, like great sailors, when the weather comes in or it's calm, you fix the sails, sort of make hay when the sun shines, and just start repurposing and restructuring and reallocating resources and stuff. So, always keeping on the sunny side of the street, and always figuring out where the next problem is, so we can throw a couple of solutions at it. It's just a fantastic way of thinking, and a far kind of more empowering and affirming philosophy. And that's kind of where we are. Fortunately, our clients have all managed to keep themselves in business, because the bottom line is sales. There's no way around that. But for the most part, we were able to speak to them and talk them down from most of the concern and worry, and direct resource into things that could matter, like making sure that content is fantastic on the website, making sure that next newsletter that goes out is just pinging and bopping with great value, securing that relationship with people, so when the tide does turn, that we're going to be the first people that they think of buying from. Those kinds of things. Sitting around and doing nothing is just absolutely kind of devastating in so many ways. And there's just too little time.
I agree. Okay, so we're at about 30 minutes here. So why don't we talk real quickly about the digital transformation in the wine industry, and what you both are working on a business right now, Achieve. So tell me what you're working on and what you see with the digital transformation.
Yes, so I'll just start and I'll hand over to James. So so digital is nothing new. There's been a lot of stuff happening, and there's been a lot of stuff which has maybe been not delivering as well as it should, but it never really got the attention that it should have had, and then obviously COVID came and people realized, this is actually quite important, and customer relationships, I think, is at the essence of it. So nobody had time or opportunities to waste. So if you wanted to make your strategy work, you needed to get on top of your digital side. So we've developed a few things which is quite exciting, and what we call our accelerator funnel, which we're getting excellent results. James has come in with like a completely new human connection, emotional engagement angle, which has been fantastic to bring that into digital. And the results have been far above international and local averages. So James, you can maybe just quickly tell what it is about and what we do, the automation and how to bring people and technology together.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are probably very few things that fundamentally matter. I think there are all sorts of things that we know don't matter. Flash over substance doesn't really matter at the end of the day. You can get a certain way down the line, waving hands up in the air and throwing money at things. Substance, I feel, kind of always wins the day at the end of the day. The thing about digital and the wine industry, of course, unlike the music industry, you can't download wine. It would be great, but that's not feasible. So the idea is to communicate and engage people, communicate with and engage people. Drinks their wine collection, and that's kind of very simple to do in theory, because that's providing value, showing value, communicating what your values are to people, is simple in concept, but often lost in sales messages, because we need to make the sale. Because sales are where the rubber meets the road, and there's quite understandably a loss of patience. We need to get to the sale as quickly as possible. But if you think about somebody visiting a wine tasting room, they get to smell everything, taste everything, feel, see the oak trees, see the wine barrels, feel the smell of the particular earth, meet the people, and that's something that's very, very difficult to translate to over digital. So working out how to have those conversations, and also to do them in a manner that is that progresses at a comfortable pace for your visitor, your user, your fan, with the idea that we both know ultimately we'd like to sell you a bottle of wine, without bashing them over the head with the sale. So we've reinvented the tried and traditional sales funnel, which is engagement up at the top, enrollment, decision making, and then finally concluding, and figured out ways on an automated basis to have incredible engagement, working with percentages, and working with excellent content at important times and intervals to just move people gently towards where we know they want to go anyway, which is to the online store. Specifically, the idea is a conversation, an approximation of a conversation live in the digital field is an easy thing to do when you understand, a simpler thing to do when you understand conversation and the nature thereof. So we've been working a lot with chatbot technology, and we've been able to create incredibly engaging conversations, which people have really responded incredibly well to. We've been able to automate email campaigns alongside that, and really coordinate a conversation and a journey for people, which people are responding to extremely well, and conversion rates have kind of climbed significantly, with the exception of the times we weren't able to sell alcohol. The arrows have been consistently in the upward direction.
That was a little bit impeding your whole progress there. Well, that sounds great. I'm so glad to hear. I love talking to entrepreneurs, and I have a long history in the music industry too. I worked in record stores for many, many years, and I have a big giant catalog of music in my head.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
I did that. I actually did that. I started doing that when I was 15. So I was working in record stores all through college. So when I went to college, I was doing that. Then I started working full time in a bank. And at night, I worked in the record store because I couldn't give it up.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So I've had to go through the evolution of musical formats in a very sad, way. Like, oh,
Yeah.
all right. So,
wine and
real
music,
quickly,
people
let's
gotta
talk
have them.
about the tasting rooms being closed, etc., and then we'll do some entrepreneurial tips, and then we'll close. Okay,
Fantastic.
so tasting rooms, they've been closed. So what happened there? This is like a
Yeah,
mini drama.
So it was obviously it was a part of the alcohol ban and the whole COVID regulation. So at a stage, people were only allowed to buy alcohol online, and retail shops had like limited hours. And obviously, they tried to keep get-togethers and gatherings small. So there were different stages where there were different amounts of people allowed. Whereas, like we still have curfews in place. So we had curfews which were very strict, and the alcohol bans were around that. So, for example, Franschhoek, where James lives, were struck particularly hard with that because people wouldn't want to go to dinner if they can't have wine, So it was all pretty much fledged together. But like a lot of the wineries did make the move to the digital side when the tasting rooms weren't allowed to sell. So they were allowed to sell via their e-commerce platforms. And I think also what, just to look at the positive side a little bit, something that came to the front was like what the value of a customer really is, because suddenly if I can't open my living room door and put them on my couch, like how will I talk to them and how will I keep them happy and how will I make sure that they love my brand as much as they should, So the e-commerce and digital communication, data analysis, and all of those things suddenly became very real, and people had to make that experience shift. We've been working on that a little bit with some of our clients, doing virtual tastings, doing automated tastings, doing customer, we call it lead nurturing, but like customer nurturing, and making sure that when the wineries couldn't have people in their tasting rooms, that we could still reach them and still engage them and make sure that they know we love them, even though we can't see them at the moment. So, James, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think you've covered that very, very well, Annelize. We were doing things like, pay now and buy and take delivery later, and it was remarkably well supported, and I think it supported to the extent that people were invested in the relationship as well, So people were with an open-ended idea. We didn't know when lockdown and the alcohol sales restriction was going to be lifted, but people were quite happy to spend, a certain, quite substantial amounts of money to pay now and support their winery and the wine that they love, and take delivery at an undisclosed date, which is a remarkable show of faith, and a remarkable testament to the people that are maintaining excellent relationships with the people that are most important to them, and that's unequivocally their customers.
Yeah, for sure. And then obviously the Safe SA Wine campaign was also, I think, had a lot of publicity internationally, and I know there was a lot of support. So I'm sure every single winery that received support during that time is very grateful for that.
I want to ask you really quickly too. So we'll talk about tips for entrepreneurs. Did the government come in at all and do any sort of support for businesses? Was there any sort of governmental grants or anything available from the government to assist?
There was a substantial amount of lip service. There was. Could we just leave it at sort of a fairly typical government response, which was some action?
Well, the reason I asked, now this is totally different, but in Germany, the German wine industry partnered up with the French wine industry, and they were coming up with really innovative digital campaigns to sell German and French wine. I don't know that was during COVID necessarily, or it was because of COVID. It was just both governments, or maybe it's not the government, maybe it's the wine, some governmental some sort. But we with you there. Yes, gotcha.
So it's just absolutely wonderful that happens, and that's happened for I use the word in the best sense of the word for political reasons, and I mean that genuinely in the best way possible, because people understand the investment and the vestedness in the wine in those regions, and making sure that an economy continues to work and provide employment seems obvious. It seems obvious, and it's interesting that we do that governments need to be singled out for taking care of the economy that pays their salaries. When in actual fact the majority couldn't, entrepreneur their way out of a paper bag,
Yeah, I think it was a very challenging time all over the world, and I think there wasn't a handbook written for how to handle COVID. So it was, I think everybody looking back. Sorry?
People did respond and do respond, and it's amazing when people get together in groups. Amazing things happen. Sometimes, like riots and stuff, people getting together is not a great idea. But for the most part, people get together, kind of all sorts of incredible things together. The human spirit is incredibly strong, and it's incredibly strong in South Africa. And the government didn't do a great deal, but people did, and people care about people. It's amazing.
And one of the things I saw here that was so interesting is we had a lot of mischanneled anger. So in the beginning, when all of it, we had the extreme shutdown and most of the businesses were closed. And then I was sitting, a lot of us were talking about the government and is this governmental control and what's happening because this was so unprecedented. And then we had a big uprising in Black Lives Matter that happened all at the same time. And then there was huge riots. And then where I live and in Portland, people were going downtown and destroying the big corporate buildings and things, which seemed sort of, not particularly helpful. But there was a lot of vandalism and a lot of targeting huge corporations in this situation. So, okay, in closing, let's talk about some tips we're all entrepreneurs. We're all charging forward through an unprecedented time, which in a historical time that's going to be in history books now that we think about it. So what are some of your tips for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I think first of all, from our side, like you've got to put a different hat on at the moment, like get out of your box is critical. But also, I think there's two sides to it. Some things in life will just never change. There's principles which is timeless. It doesn't matter which crisis you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in times of prosperity. There's certain basic essentials that entrepreneurs should always go for. Like it's always important to look for ways to make the customer happy and things like that. So that's one side. The other side is, if ever there was a time to think new, now is the time. So looking at making sure that you know what's available, making sure that you're on top of new tools and mechanisms and everything else. You can't exclude digital at the moment. We don't know what 2022 will hold. So make sure that you like nurture what you've got and like think fresh, think new, be bold, try new things, and make sure that you measure whatever you do. I think if you're an entrepreneur, marrying the creative side and everything else with the result side is quite important at the moment. James?
Yeah, I would say, speaking sort of digitally now, I would say that understanding in the kind of detail that you do in your wine tasting space or your home. For instance, when that wine tasting room was built, an architect was involved. They knew exactly where everything was going to go. They knew that the person was going to park here. They're going to walk down this walkway, see that water feature, step up these stairs. They're going to walk into your tasting room. A staff member is going to greet them with a certain kind of smile and say a certain type of thing. They're going to move through there. And this is the whole story is beautifully mapped out. And then it's practiced and rehearsed. And that's why your brand and your wine, that relationship between the first time your customer has ever set foot on your premises or had any sensory experience of you is established. That same level of detail should be applied to your digital experience. Understand what that journey is going to be, where we all know that ultimately we want to sell you something, but that's just that could be considered crude if you're going to go straight for that. So working out what the sale is, if the drop in the center bit, the drop out, and the ripples move out. How does that whole conversation track back to the very first person somebody likes you on Facebook or follows you on Instagram? Map that all out. It's your story. You decide what that is. They're little boxes and arrows and little mind maps that just get plugged in, and then from that, it's relatively simple to brief the building constructor or the website designer or your systems operating guy to actually build that thing out. And just reflect, figure out what the personality is, and reflect that in the content, and be consistent.
Yeah, I think the last thing, James, I like what you're saying, but just the last thing, Jessyca, as well, you mentioned earlier how times have changed and the lifestyle changes that came out. One of the things that happened, and it's happening in the digital space now a lot, is like decluttering. You don't need everything just because everybody has it. Like it's definitely a time for entrepreneurs or business owners or wineries to decide what they don't need as much as what they do need. So nobody can afford to have anything which is not absolutely essential and valuable. And that's quite exciting for us for the future, because I think the whole lifetime value of your brand and your business and your customer and all of those things are critical at the moment. And everybody's forced to look at that, which makes it easier to declutter and get rid of what isn't really delivering.
And I think in my situation with digital, it's very important for me to, as you mentioned, digital moves on a daily basis. So with one person, it's very difficult to do all of the things, but I'm working on TikTok. I'm working on Amazon Live. I'm working on Instagram Live. So in my spare 50 hours a week, I'm behind the scenes, like studying. Okay, what do we do on TikTok now? I received a package from 3 ladies and a vine, and so my motive at the moment is to film me opening it on TikTok. I just haven't had a lot of time to do that. I'm working and doing all of this about 50 hours a week. So okay, so why don't we go ahead and close? Did you have something else you wanted to add, James?
Oh yes. Measure everything. If it can't be measured, then have a very good reason for doing it.
Yes, we have a governmental entity in the United States called the Small Business Decision Center. Now, what they do and provide, you can get loans and things from the government for small businesses. Most of us prefer entrepreneurs. We don't necessarily want to have a loan. We'd rather create the revenue and before you have a loan. However, they will meet with you and it doesn't cost anything. So you can meet with entrepreneurs and they give you entrepreneurial ideas. I tend to invent things. And so when I invent them, so I've been over there talking to them about how do I monetize what I'm doing. And one of the ways to monetize what I'm doing is I've got several countries interested in tours. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. Right. So Annelize, if someone's looking for you, the nice thing about video and YouTube is it's called an evergreen platform, which means this isn't going away. So if someone were trying to find you, how would they find you?
Yeah, I would say they can go to our website, which is achievethroughaction. Like James, what is our website?
achievethroughaction.com.
James is in charge of that. Okay. They can look for James and then they can find me. Yeah. So and they can go to our website.
Platforms. What are that you use or that people can find you on?
Yeah, so I'm quite active on LinkedIn. I've got a lot of personal connections on LinkedIn. That's mostly where I do the professional side of our business. And then we use Facebook and Instagram. But we are not as active in our own marketing. We're doing a lot of our own marketing through our clients. So we run a lot of platforms. So actually on weekends, we try and get out in the vineyards and in the orchards with bottles of wine and food rather. And
promise to post more and never get around to it.
Yeah. So, but people can look at our website, or they can pop us a message on our LinkedIn or drop us a mail. We prefer meetings like we're having now, like a Zoom. What you mentioned, Jessyca, is very important. Like you've got the small business development support. Like we also like to surround ourselves with bright minds and energetic people with new ideas all the time. I think it's a time to be open and agile and be ready to listen to new ideas at the moment.
Okay, so I'm going to end the broadcast. And so I want to tell you goodbye and thank you so much. And it's going to take just a minute for it to end. So keep smiling over there. Don't do anything